And I did make mention, guys, of the fact. I did make mention of the fact that the whole show is interconnected today. I don't know if you noticed it. I don't know if you were paying attention, but Kevin Lindsay, in talking about HVAC, talked about the conditions
Yeah.
inside of the cab. Talked about the idea of what's going on in the cab having an overall effect on us down the road. The idea of the world that surrounds us over the course of 10, 20, 25 years, actually making the sort of impact on us that we don't realize is happening until we're right in the middle of it. It's funny because it ties in perfectly with the highway to health topic of today. Dr. Ben Kligler joins us this morning. He's the executive director for the Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation, Veterans Health Administration, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And Dr. Kligler, as always, welcome back. We love having you on. And you join us during National Truck Driver Appreciation Week. So your topic for today could not be better realized.
Oh, I'm so glad to be back and glad to be part of that. Thank you.
And you use the term surroundings is what we're talking about, and that covers a lot of things. And I think when we were talking on Maintenance Matters with Kevin Lindsay, who is head of maintenance over at Travel Centers of America, how we create the world around us, how we construct that, who we choose to have in it, what we choose to have in it, makes a big difference. But can you, in your own way, explain the word surroundings? And I'll kind of let you hold court on that.
Sure. Thank you. And just for the context of this, in the VA, when we talk about the whole health model, we have this circle of health that we talk about. And you're in the middle, of course, and around you, in terms of what are the things that help you move towards greater health in your life, there are these 8 what we call domains or areas of self-care, right? So we've talked about different ones, food and drink, moving the body, etc. But surroundings ends up being a really important one that often we don't really think about. What is the environment immediately around you in terms of where you spend your time? That might be in your truck if you're a driver, but it might also be when you land somewhere in a place that you're staying for a night, or it might be in your home. And then how does that environment have an impact on your overall well-being, on your sense of positivity and energy in your life? How does that environment support you in making good decisions? And then the second level of that, which I'd really put out there just because for myself personally, this ends up being the most important part.
Dr. Kligler,
how often do you manage to get
Ben,
outside? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Can you,
sure.
Can you hold on 1 second? We want to make sure we got your signal good because this information is too important. So give us 1 second here. We're going to get Dr. Kligler back on in a second. You guys probably heard a little bit of that popping and whistling that was going on. We just want to make sure that Dr. Kligler is set up for success here. By the way, we're talking about the term surroundings and how it fits all into your overall holistic approach to health here on Road Gang Radio. Don't forget, in just a little bit, our good friend Lindsay LaRue is going to be joining us. Lindsay Lawler herself, the double L, is going to be lean and mean and on the scene. Yeah, Ben, I just wanted to make sure that you were being heard. You were doing great. It's just we make sure the connection is solid. Welcome back. Sorry about that.
Sure, and I hope that's better now. Is that sounding better?
Perfection. Absolutely.
Okay, great. So I was waxing poetic there, but I think where I dropped off there was talking about surroundings, not only in terms of what's going on immediately around you, the office that I'm sitting in or the cab that I'm driving in, but what about outside? How are you relating to the larger environment around you? There's so much data now about how healthy it can be to spend time outside, whatever it is you're doing. And so I think surroundings can be both immediate, right where you are, which you can sometimes have a lot of control over, and then beyond that, out into the larger world, which you really can have a lot of choices about how you make that happen during your day. So I think it's got a couple of different layers there.
So let's kind of talk about that really quickly. I also want to make the point here, just to kind of go back to our earlier conversation, Dr. Kligler. We were talking about the stress we were putting on people changing the air filters in their home, but in some ways, it actually applies to the outdoors as well. It really is important to find spaces where, there aren't air filters for outside, but wait, there are. They're called trees. And people often forget that. And that one of the great things about finding an urban park or finding someplace maybe a little bit outside of the area you live where you're able to kind of walk through a canopied area can make a big difference if you manage that on a regular basis to find the spaces where there are, the natural filters of nature, both from a sound and an air perspective, to kind of seek out. I mean, in regards to the impact of a change in our lives, for the people who are rumbling, bumbling, stumbling in the industrialized world, how much of a difference and how often should we find our way to places that provide us the sound and air buffer that we need in regards to the outdoors?
Well, I don't know of a specific study that says it has to be, once a day or 3 times a week or 5 times a day. All I know is that, speaking for myself and just from my years as a clinician, the more the better. And so, for example, my office now in the VA is, you could say it's a pretty standard kind of government issue office. It does have a window, which I'm very fortunate for, but if I spend my whole day in the office and I don't just go outside and walk around and just smell the air and walk by some trees, I got to do that a couple times a day in order to really keep my focus all day. And that may be just me. This is something that's particularly, important to me, kind of in the way I look at my own well-being. But I think you really can't do it enough. And I think at a minimum, once a day to take a minute. I mean, literally, it could be 2 or 3 minutes, really, to just be outside somewhere with some green, if you can pull it off, and just take a couple of deep breaths. And I think it just goes to that really important part of this whole health equation, which is, connecting with something that's bigger than yourself. We get all tied up in our little world, and that includes my little office or cab of your truck or wherever it might be. And I just think taking that deep breath in an outdoor environment where you just can connect with the fact that you're just one little bit in a much larger and really, I mean, honestly, beautiful world. I just think at least once a day. How about we'll put that out there as Ben Kligler's not scientifically proven recommendation for how often you got to do this.
By the way, completely endorse that. We have a little process here before we start the show every morning. Dre comes in here around 6 o'clock every morning. He arrives around 6, 10 minutes to 6, and he sets up all the connective, stuff that kind of gets us on Odyssey and Facebook and YouTube and all the other places where we do the show, including YouTube, where people can actually ask questions of Dr. Kligler if they want to. But right around 10 minutes before we have our moment of Zen, where we kind of get in the space to do the show, every morning I watch Dre walk outside right where the fountain is in front of this building. We're on one of the most canopy, beautiful streets in the world. I never ask him where he's going. I know exactly what he's doing. He's kind of got himself set. He stands his butt up. He walks outside, closes the door, and just takes a minute to kind of get himself right before coming back in. And of course, it means, we have a big bird population that hangs out over here, so they start making a little bit of noise. The babbling of the fountain, the cars haven't started coming by for the school zone yet. There's just this moment of like quiet Zen, and of course it's on Esplanade Avenue, which means there's a little bit of a wind tunnel because it's in between both the river and one of the largest parks in the United States. And so you really want to kind of find these moments. It's like stealing moments. I do want to talk about, you brought it up, the simple importance of having a window in regards to your surroundings, the simple importance of not being in an enclosed space that offers no visual access to anywhere but here, if that makes any sense. Do we know why that is so? I mean, we can feel why it's important, but do we know why it's so important?
I think it probably has to do with kind of what basically biochemical reactions happen in your body when you're exposed to natural light. And so all kinds of healthy neurotransmitters, whether it's, serotonin or whatever it might be, I think get a jump start. So just to give you an example, they have data that when people are in the hospital, let's say for surgery or for some other reason, people that have access to an outdoor view, they do better. They stay a shorter period of time in the hospital. They've even done these amazing kind of studies where they have, where people can't get access to a window, they have on the curtain that goes around their bed a picture of a landscape. So it even just simulates the outside. And even that can contribute to a faster recovery. And so there's just lots and lots and lots of data. And there's so many studies now that show that, for example, college students who manage to get outside into a quiet environment every day. I mean, they've actually done these randomized trials where they had a group of kids that went out to the park once a day for 20 minutes or a half hour versus a group that went outside but didn't get into a kind of, they went into kind of a more concrete jungle kind of environment. And the ones that get out where there's a little fresh air and a little bit of green, they end up performing better in terms of their academics. And so I'm sure it just has something to do with the fact that from an evolutionary perspective, right? When did we ever think we were built to just be inside in a windowless room all day? We have not evolved for that, as humans. We are evolved to be connected to the outside.
What is
and
it?
I do think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say caves are hiding spaces from big saber-tooth things. They are not places where we're supposed to live out our existence. I mean, that's just the truth of the matter, right? I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do think that as much as I think, from what I understand, I haven't done it, but, trucking can be just such a demanding and kind of stressful and taxing occupation. One plus is you do have that window.
Yeah.
You're not driving anywhere without a window. And I think probably for a lot of people, the challenge is more just taking a minute to notice, right, what's outside and what's around you. And I mean, I'm sure everybody who's listening can relate. Sometimes you get in your car or your truck, you put yourself on autopilot, you drive somewhere an hour later, and you didn't notice one thing while you were there, except, keeping yourself safe and following the rules. But at the same time, you didn't sort of process what was around you. And I think we can always do better with that. And that is one plus. I mean, I have colleagues who work in offices without windows, and certainly there are plenty of people whose jobs don't even allow them that opportunity to view the outside. And I think that is a bit of a natural advantage that truckers might have, is that they have that right in front of them all the time. So I think it's right there for you to sort of it's as simple as paying attention to it, I think.
Every once in a while we do shows where we ask our listeners the question of what some of their favorite places, some of their favorite routes to run, some of their favorite drives to take. The adventurer, explorer, and author Peter Stark has actually come on the show rather than for his half-hour segment, but for a full hour, asking the drivers their favorite last empty places, those places they can go to where they can actually see the stars at night. And there is something to be said for being mindful of your surroundings. Surroundings just aren't about where you are, but they're about actually taking in where you are, because you do point out, whether we want to or not, if we go out in the sunlight, serotonin comes. By the way, can you explain, and I know what this is, but can you tell our listeners what serotonin is, and we can talk something about some of the chemicals that get released from being outside and what their positive impacts are? We can start with serotonin.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think as people know in general, there are a whole bunch of what we would call neurotransmitters. These are the small molecules that basically your body uses to signal different parts of the nervous system, and even signal between some of the organs in certain circumstances. And some of those neurotransmitters provoke a kind of more positive mood, a more upbeat sort of I don't know, you could use the word happy, but maybe content is a better word. An example of that would be serotonin. So just as one to play this out a little more, a lot of the medicines that we use for treating depression are medicines that specifically increase the level of serotonin in the body. So what's happening then is really your nervous system, your brain is getting sort of more positive signals. Things are okay. Things are not, dire or in a crisis. Another example that I'm sure people are familiar with would be adrenaline or epinephrine. That's also a neurotransmitter, and that's what's released when you get scared. You have a fight or flight response, and I think everybody's familiar with what that does. I mean, that makes your heart beat faster, makes you ready to move, but it also triggers kind of a mood state that you might describe as more I don't know, tense or high strung, and that can have a positive side, obviously. If you're a downhill ski racer, you need that adrenaline to get where you're going, but at the same time, in the long term, too much adrenaline is going to take a toll on you. So there's a whole science of what neurotransmitters can contribute to what kind of moods. There's another one that people have probably heard about, which is dopamine. Dopamine does a lot of different things in the brain and in the body, but one of the things that provokes an increase in dopamine is something new, a change. So, for example, if you go from inside in a closed environment out into the sunlight or out into the outside, you're going to get a burst of dopamine. And that can be another thing that can help kind of elevate your mood or give you a sense of satisfaction. Now, that can be some liabilities with that too, because people may know that one of the reasons that we think the internet and social media are so addictive and can become kind of a negative force for some people is because they give you that dopamine hit. So every time you scroll to the next video on TikTok or the next Instagram post, you get a little charge. Oh, here's something new I haven't seen before. And, that can be a good thing up to a point, but that can also become something that actually pulls you away from the environment you're really in. And that kind of constantly souping up your dopamine outputs, that's not necessarily going to help you in the long run with a more stable and balanced and healthy kind of perspective on things.
I wanted to
Yeah,
ask
it's
you.
amazing all the things you can do. I will say just one other thing, and I know this is not our topic for today, but exercise is another thing that reliably increases serotonin. Even just a walk, your serotonin level is going to go up. So there's lots of different ways you can approach it.
Well, here's the thing, though. I think it actually ties in beautifully because if, in fact, you're doing that walk in a place where if you can combine it, the idea of the physicality of the walk, but if you're talking about one of these canopied areas that we were talking about earlier in regards to surrounding, is that taking a walk often requires you to change your surroundings. And if you're walking as opposed to a treadmill, if you're walking in actual time and space, simply changing and creating variety and by the way, removing the monotony. If you really like scrolling, there is no better scrolling than a walk in a canopied city or an urban park or on a trail. I mean, it's a great scroll. I mean, you're constantly changing what you're looking at, which is a real natural high as well. Yeah, I think it's. I wanted to ask you about the dopamine thing too, and the destructive scrolling because it is removing you. Part of what and this is me asking a genuine question as opposed to being like, here's my thought process. But the idea that simply ramping up the dopamine over and over and over again, part of a successful life, it seems. Tell me if I'm right about this. Is about managing the moments when we're not in dopamine spike and finding joy and contentment in them, so that we're not constantly relying on rushes and highs. Is that
Yeah.
really where we want to head in regards to creating proper surroundings?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a time and place for that kind of rapid, exciting stimulus, and then there's a real kind of I don't know, skill or practice that you need to kind of try to bring into your life of finding that content feeling when you're just in a quiet place, right? And whatever that takes for you, whether that's taking a minute to reflect on somebody you love in your life or something you're grateful for or a pet that you love, whatever it might be, and cultivating that ability so that then when you do jump out there into the whether it's the social media or other places where you have that kind of stimulating inputs, okay, they're going to work for you, but it's not like you become dependent on that as the only kind of the only source of a positive energy in your life. And I think this is super important, and I know we all say this to each other, and it gets tired after a while, but I think when you talk about surroundings, the surroundings of the internet, although there's so many great things we can learn on the internet and also so much entertainment, and those are not surroundings that people have evolved to benefit from. Can I just say it that way? People, the engagement with that electronic kind of in the ether surrounding has to be really, you have to manage that in your life. It's very easy to fall into an unhealthy pattern with being too dependent on that kind of surroundings as opposed to what's actually around you, the people you can actually talk to, the air you can actually breathe, and that little moment outside. So I think when you talk about surroundings, you're talking about physical surroundings, but then you're also talking about kind of mental, psychological surroundings. So I think that's another really important part of it.
We actually have a friend of mine, Tim, joined the chat, and I got a chance on his Trucker Voices podcast to go do a podcast with him, just kind of talk about what the role of a podcaster and a radio broadcaster were. I had such a good time doing that with those guys that when he popped up in the conversation, as many people on the YouTube channel when we do this pop into the chat, I get these slight kind of bumps of feeling a little bit better. And can you talk about the impact of positive people as part of our surroundings and what that can mean to us in regards to maintaining, once again, maintaining relationships, but that a porch is a great thing. A porch with people we like is even better, right?
That's right. That's probably the perfect thing from my point of view, because you get the beautiful outdoors and the fresh air, and you get that kind of feeling of connection. And yeah, same thing. Just like I was saying about all the evidence now about how an outdoor environment can transform our kind of inner environment in terms of the balance of neurochemicals, neurotransmitters that's circulating in our brains and in our bodies. Same thing. Social connection triggers all these really positive sort of really biological cascades in your body. So there's another neurotransmitter that's also a hormone that people have heard about a lot, probably recently, called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that a lot of it is triggered by social connection. Some people say it's actually the kind of core neurotransmitter in the experience of love or connection. Now that, I think we need some more research on that, but having that social environment. And not to go on and on about this either, but there's lots of data that people that share meals, whether it's with family or friends, they have much less problem with excessive weight gain. They may even have a longer lifespan. Like when they look at these, what they call the blue zones around the Earth, which are areas or communities that have the longest lifespans, one of the most consistent things they see is people sharing meals. That's one of the themes across the world that basically helps people be healthier and live longer. So, yeah, and I will say, if you can't manage to get that person there in person, this is one great thing about technology, that a phone call or a FaceTime or a Zoom, I mean, those can really work too. Can't always get the people you love there on the porch with you, but you can find other ways to be with them that aren't just, looking at their Instagram. So I think you got to really work that as part of the equation.
And like I said, the equation is an interesting kind of thing here, because so much of what we're talking about is organic, but at the same time, right down to the chart of yourself at the center of a mindful awareness of me and all the things you kind of need to have around you. There are ways to equate this. There are ways to kind of put this together as a checklist. Not that we should be this nobody should be efficiently moving through like the first 25 plays of an NFL game that are already called, but there are ways to kind of check in and make sure, hey, you know what, maybe I should shift my surroundings. Hey, you know what, maybe I should have something to eat that's a little more healthy. That there are ways of kind of creating a formula that is not perfect, but is certainly better than where we are. Do you have any final thoughts on that, by the way, just to kind of give people a way to strategize how to have an active,
Sure.
productive life?
Yeah, I have one very specific thought that I would just really encourage people to maybe try out. There's a tool we use in the VA. It's called the Personal Health Inventory. It's a very brief thing. It's like a 2-page tool. You can find it on our website. Basically, what it does is it just encourages you to walk through these 8 areas that we're talking about on any given day and say, okay, this one, I feel like I'm where I want to be. This one, I feel like I need work. And then that helps you sort of steer yourself to where you want to be on that day or that week. And you're not going to do the personal health inventory, we call it the PHI. You're not going to do it every day. But if you take a look at that every so often, or honestly, I know people who put up this little magnet of the circle of health. They put it up in their work environment or at home. And it's just a little reminder, okay, here are these things that go into my overall well-being. Where do I need to focus in today or this week or this month? And that's a really easy way to do it.
By the way, he said that website, it's va.gov/whole health, and that means WHOLE health, va.gov/whole whole health. Dr. Ben Kligler, as he is off to do, has joined us on Highway to Health. Just to kind of encourage you guys to check your surrounding, check your sixes, make sure that everything around you is where you want it to be and how you want it to be. We're doing that over here as we put this Fastport studio together. Ben, by the way, is the Executive Director for the Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation, Veterans Health Administration, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Dr. Ben Kligler, thank you, and thank you for joining us during National Truck Driver Appreciation Week.
Oh, thanks for having me.